Welcome everyone, and welcome to the Omni Interactions, Will Your Work at Home Workforce Fall Short? We are going to talk today about creating a work at home plan that works. We know that a lot of people have sent their workforces home during this incredible pandemic time, but we want to make sure that your workforce is doing the best that they possibly can be doing. And we're going to talk about a lot of strategies to make that happen. Today, our Chief Revenue Officer, David Parkhurst, will walk you through 5 specifics that you can test to ensure that your workforce is doing what it can be doing to get the most results possible. And without further ado, I want to thank you all for joining and turn it over to David.
Thank you so much, Julie. I really appreciate the introduction, and always welcome the to-dos. So appreciate all of that, and really appreciate all of you for joining. Certainly good to see some familiar names, if not faces, in this format. Folks that I know have been passionate about work at home for many, many years. As Julie mentioned, I'm David Parkhurst. Chief Revenue Officer is a fancy title, but really at the end of it all, I've been a passionate believer in the work at home model for almost 20 years at this point. There's my beautiful pre-COVID picture, but really have had an opportunity to get to know the work at home model by working with a number of companies out there, as well as the current company Omni, and really across a number of different functions. So what you won't hear today is a sales pitch, but really, just trying to drink from a thimble the waterfall of items that we could certainly cover, and we'll continue to do so in our webinar series. So with that said, again, just knowing that that time is precious here for all of us. I think one of the things that I've been really excited to see over the course of the last 7 months or so with regards to the pandemic, really everyone, whether they've gone willingly, have been there already, or have gone, kind of kicking and screaming, is that there's really been a global acceptance, or maybe in some cases an acquiescence of work at home. And so, really almost overnight, all of us have been required to, engage in some way, shape, or form with various elements of our business and send them to an at-home environment. It's really obvious for those of you that spend any time on LinkedIn to see there's been measured a 20x increase in work at home chatter across social media platforms, especially LinkedIn. And it's on one hand a huge pleasure for all of us to see just the successes that everyone has been stating of just, hey, we've gotten all of our workforce to work at home, and it only took us 1 day or 7 days or 30 days. And I think that that's really, really tremendous, and certainly an accomplishment that a lot of folks can take credit for. And thank goodness for all of the technologies that we have available to us. But with that said, as I see some of those things, really the concern that I have is that it's one thing to get everybody working at home and connected and have the technologies that they need and access. But this quote that we utilize within our own company, from our CEO, Chris Carrington, really calls out and just says, just because you can send your people home to work doesn't necessarily mean that your business or the different functions that you've sent home are actually going to work as effectively as you would like them to be. And so, some of that points out what we want to cover today, which is really, now that everybody is at home, or significant portions of your staff might be at home, what are the best and right things that you should be looking at and focusing on, and even taking advantage of in this really unique time, and certainly our lifetimes, and even in the history of the world, to really kind of take advantage of these wonderful things that are possible in a work at home environment. Today there's statistics that I've read, and happy to share any of the things after the fact that we mention or quote or show here. But today it's estimated that as many as 87% of frontline agents and supervisors currently working from home either haven't worked at home previously, or haven't been properly vetted to be someone who's actually successful in working from home, and knowing how to do it correctly, having the correct kind of personal and skill set makeup to be able to do that. And even beyond that, 23% of current call center staff in the US that has been sent home doesn't have a suitable at-home environment to be able to work effectively in that scenario. And those are just two examples of the reality that a number of companies are facing as they've sent their folks home and trying to figure out the best and right ways to address the world. And again, even beyond that, a number of tools and processes and procedures and even just basic mindsets are built for bricks and mortar call center environments and don't necessarily translate as well as we might think to a virtual or a work at home type of environment. So with that said, transitioning slightly, love this quote and always have, but I especially like it for today's world. Certainly we've been through things across the board in terms of just tumultuous times that none of us would have predicted even just at the start of this year. But at the same time, even though there's dark and stormy waters, there really is a lot of hope. And as we've all scrambled at various companies to try and make kind of a remote world work, really this is a huge opportunity, I think, for us as executives, for us as businesses, for us as societies to be able to try and perfect a number of things within this work at home model. It's really worth it to do so because even though we all know that at some point this pandemic will subside and life as we know it will somewhat return back to normal, estimates are that 40% or more of the roles that have shifted to remote are going to stay that way permanently. So that means that for a number of companies, probably most of yours, since you're here listening to this webinar, it means that we all need to learn and adapt and know how to work and understand and engage in this remote world better and more effectively and more efficiently than ever. And the reality is, much like sailing and Franklin Roosevelt's quote here, we're not going to learn everything in a day. We're not going to cover everything in the next 20 minutes, for this webinar. But with that said, there's huge opportunity right now as we're all in this to be practicing and learning and doing things better and better as we go forward. So it really is worth the effort, and a call out to some friends at Fifth Talent for letting me plagiarize some of their data and insights here. But just a couple of examples of why it's worth it, and kind of looking inward to your own teams. This is a study of north of 4,000 agents and supervisors from all over and all different types of companies. And both the agents and supervisors who have been shifted to a work at home environment all feel like things, generally speaking, are going anywhere from somewhat better to much, much better. Not surprisingly, things like adherence and absenteeism, but even satisfaction rates and things. And to that, people are answering much, much more specifically and saying, I want to work from home either all the time or much of the time, and I want to do that now and going forward. And that's how I'm going to determine where I work and how much I work and all of those types of things. So again, just really stating the fact that this is critical for us as executives and leaders from a customer support and customer service and customer experience standpoint to really be able to focus and hone in on as we go forward. So there's 5 things that really wanted to call out specifically, and again, as we go forward, we'll be focusing in more detail on each of these areas, but wanted to call out 5 specific ways and areas that companies like yours really need to focus and think about how to maybe take where you are today, which is most likely having some or most or all of your staff and workforce remote, and how you can kind of continue to improve that over time. But before I do that, I just want to put up a quick poll for folks and just get a sense from the audience of kind of where you are today and where you think you'll be in the future as far as work at home goes. So we'll just take 60 seconds and let people focus on this poll and answer it, and then we'll show some quick data from a percentage response standpoint. Just as people do that, again, this first concept that really want to call out is the concept of an at-home first strategy. And somewhat fortunately for me, I started out almost 20 years ago now at a company called Alpine Access that was really the first of the kind of work at home models on a broad scale from a kind of partner call center standpoint. And we really kind of didn't have physical facilities, bricks and mortar call centers. There really wasn't any of that. So we kind of came into the environment in the work at home world saying, we don't have anything that's physical, it's all virtual. And back in those days it was dial-up modems and kind of low bandwidth for sure, and low computer processing power and no cloud computing and all of those types of things. But we really had the advantage of being able to look at the work at home model in kind of a pure play type of scenario. And several of us might still be in that situation as we are at Omni, but within your existing environments, most likely you have physical bricks and mortar type of work, and now you're transitioning a lot of those concepts and procedures and processes into a virtual world. So let me close the poll here and just show it quickly. It looks like most people are in sort of the same boat. Either people were doing a lot before, during, and after the pandemic, so continuing to see this trend continuing, and then a lot of folks who are saying, hey, I didn't do this before, but now I'm doing it, and I recognize the fact that this is going to continue after the pandemic. So appreciate everyone who gave their input there. But again, it just goes back to the fact that this is really worth it, and the focus is necessary. So I'll hide those. But back to the at-home first strategy, just a kind of distinct encouragement for everybody to and I'll geek out here a little bit to follow some advice from that wise sage Yoda, which is you must unlearn what you have learned. So all of us have kind of predisposed kind of understandings of how call centers work and how customer support works and how supervisory staff works and how to hire and train and manage agents works. A lot of those things are maybe similar, but really need to be looked at with an entirely new and different lens. So as you think of people and process and platforms, how are those things dramatically different for your virtual and remote workers than they are for your kind of in-center bricks and mortar types? And honestly, this is the #1 failure point for companies that have tried this. I've had the privilege of working with close to 300 different companies at differing stages and levels of their kind of at-home kind of work and investigation. And this is always the failure point where it brings particular mindsets, particular processes, procedures, and platforms, and tries to take a bricks and mortar kind of square peg and kind of plug it into the kind of round at-home hole, or vice versa. And so, companies that kind of give lip service to this, but don't focus on all of the areas, and even potentially start out with a blank slate and just say, if we were building this entirely from the ground up in a purely virtual environment, how would we look at this differently? How might we approach all of our steps differently? And the next 4 items that we'll touch on, we'll go into a little bit more detail on each of those. But just again, would encourage everybody to think, kind of strategically and kind of philosophically about this. And we just have consistently found, in the partners that we've worked with and the companies that I've interacted and engaged with, the more you question, the more success you're going to find at every step in this process. And I had one company, and this was gosh, almost 100 years ago it feels like, but this was in the early 2000s, and started to work with a company, and a very senior leader said, hey, I like the model, but people that work with us really like pizza parties and they really like to get fed. How are we possibly going to kind of continue to engage them in that meaningful way when they're working from home? And it sounds silly, but then one of their frontline workers said, well, what if you got us all, at that time it was Pizza Hut coupons, and sent them out to us, and we could order our own pizza, and we could have social gatherings and still do those things, and do that with webcams and whatnot, and we'd still have a pizza party, but we'd be virtual. And so again, somewhat of a silly example, but literally you could see the light bulb go on in the executive's head. And it was that first moment where, for me at least, you looked at it and said, hey, it's a lot of the same, kind of opportunities and challenges in the remote environment. But how do you figure out that kind of very different means to the same ends that you want to get to, which are happy customers, really satisfied employees, and you kind of frontline workers and supervisors, and what are the best ways to make that happen? So I'll kick forward, and one of the honestly the greatest advantages that we all have as we now work in and look forward to working in a remote environment is being able to broaden our selectivity. And some of that is just being able to potentially kind of go out and source to places or locations or even kind of individuals that maybe you hadn't been previously. So if you have a physical call center and it's in Arizona, or it's in the middle of the country, or you're in an expensive location in the Northeast, or whatever the case may be, now suddenly, if you kind of approach it correctly, and we'll touch on this, you might have access to people that work in places that are even further away from your central hub, or maybe in distant locations in the state that you're located in, or maybe you go national, or at some point even international, to start to look for the best and right talent, that people that are passionate about your brands, have all the skill sets that you could possibly dream of. So again, instead of that 30 miles around a physical facility radius of limitation, you really can start to dip your toe in more broad and deeper waters to be able to find that talent. So again, going to that at home first thing, identifying who are the people that we're trying to find, and how can I do this differently so that I'm not just limiting myself in finding those places, and what are the hurdles or barriers, whether that's process or procedure, or even just internal politics and kind of limited thinking that I need to break through to do that. But a number of companies are showing success by saying, hey, we were previously in center, and now we're going to expand to some fully remote sourcing, so we don't even need to bring people into the center to be able to do things. And what do I need to do as a leader to be able to make that happen, and what things do I need to think about? And again, we're touching on a few of them here. Or maybe I'm hub and spoke at the moment, and now I can investigate kind of truly remote options where I don't need someone to be close by to have equipment repaired, or hey, maybe I'm even expanding nationwide and just making this opportunity available. And so, as you start to think of, that broader access to talent, which again, potentially gets you, greater skill sets, gets you more applications, which allows you to be more selective, allows you to, kind of broaden the search for things like language capabilities, or, finding people who are willing to work maybe part-time, all of the, or different hours of the days and nights and weekends and all of those types of things. All of a sudden you're presented with the opportunity and challenge of looking at it and saying, hey, now I need to change potentially my sourcing process. It's no longer maybe the next person through the door who meets the minimum requirements is the one who gets selected. Maybe I can do some kind of front end assessments, or those types of things that allow me to identify over a course of time the best and right folks, and then kind of start from the top and select kind of those most exceptional people who fit those requirements, and then work your way through until you're filling a class or a seasonal ramp, or those types of things. And from a process standpoint, it does start to identify more questions to answer. How can I check bandwidth and latency, and how can I check technical skills or assess someone's physical environment? I think the biggest encouragement here is just considering and thinking through all those questions like we talked about. The more you question, the more success you'll find. But whether you have a smaller team or a significantly large team, some of these things up to maybe 25 or 30 people, you can brute force it through, but pretty quickly you're going to realize as you get more applications, you need more automation. Location verifications and background checks and bandwidth testing and skills-based testing, all of those things, that there are solutions out there today with great companies that can do this with you, do this for you, and be looking at how can I automate my processes. And otherwise, really the outcome of this, which transitions us to the next stage, is you're likely going to find as you get more access to more talent, people that maybe wouldn't traditionally come into a call center, you're going to get more experienced, more highly educated, and ultimately a more demanding workforce because they have higher expectations of what this job and what this role will look like. And that transitions us into training, which is sort of the logical next step. But you're starting to see a trend here as I talk, which is you need to think of everything remote and adapt to a source of differentiated talent with new demographics, and probably need to educate them differently. So if you're sourcing and hiring better talent that's more experienced and more highly educated, you need to kind of train them in a different way. And so, in this environment, in a 20 to 30-minute webinar, I can talk at you in a webinar format with a PowerPoint, and people can get through it. But that obviously is not working for trainings that run for a week or 2 or 4 weeks or even more. So you need to start to think of, okay, what does kind of generate excitement, enthusiasm, and consistency of engagement for people in a remote environment? And one of the key things that has been proven out with adult learning theory and kind of remote and distance learning educational best practices is things like flipping classrooms. So rather than having a instructor reading through PowerPoints and then having people share their screen, doing a lot more of the learning in offline modules, or kind of breaking out some of those bite-sized pieces, and then reserving the live classroom for practicing and doing breakout sessions, and utilizing kind of best and right technologies that go beyond just basic kind of Zoom or similar types of technologies that are really just meant for video conference, and look at things like an Adobe Connect or even Microsoft Teams or others that really give you capabilities to do things like breakout sessions and interactivity and kind of live polling and all of the other features and functionalities that allow you to really test and kind of follow the engagement of people all the way through the process. So again, so much more there and just scratching the surface, but I think you're getting, again, the trend. And the next piece of it is, okay, you've got exceptionally kind of sourced and trained people. What opportunities might there be in a remote environment for us all to operate more fluidly? And there's many things here, but one of them in my mind is really, this is an awesome time for us to reassess the organizational structure. We've kind of gotten into a traditional call center environment that says, hey, we've got, these people who are, frontline folks, and they're doing a very rote type of work, and that's becoming less and less true. The work that they're doing is more and more complex. They're doing it remotely now. Is that more traditional command and control type of approach really what's most appropriate, especially now that you've got a more skilled individual who's better trained, that maybe just doesn't need the same type of support and the kind of moment by moment hand holding, but you might actually be better, kind of served, and your customers better served if you give them more opportunity to kind of be unleashed and deliver upon the promises that you have from an experience standpoint. And I think, companies like Zappos and T-Mobile has an exceptional kind of pod concept that they've been going down, and even the U.S. military has really looked at a differentiation and change from kind of that traditional command and control approach. And one example of that is really even as people are doing their kind of main agent call center functions, maybe rather than siloed functions for things like hiring and training and QA and kind of supervisory management and mentoring. A lot of companies, including Omni, we're looking at and today engaging those agents and having them perform some of those functions as an additional component of their job. Maybe spending 75% of their time on phones or in chats or emails, and then another 25% fulfilling some of those other pieces like QA that engages them more deeply, gets them more vested in the success of the overall team and program, and provides them additional future job opportunities and uplifting. And with an operations standpoint, you can also look at better hiring capabilities to source full-time, part-time, even people willing to work split shifts. Tremendous opportunity there from an efficiency and effectiveness, and tapping into the reality that most people aren't looking as much for a kind of 9 to 5, 40-hour a week job, especially in this industry. And that just points to even getting rid of shift bids potentially. Looking at how you change your approach to staffing and scheduling rather than forcing people into working when they want to or don't want to. Being more flexible in terms of what you allow people to do and select for themselves from a staffing and scheduling standpoint. And last but not least, just to focus on reducing capex. And certainly there's sort of an implied, this is only financial type of concept. And obviously, if you can look to reduce your physical footprint, from a building standpoint and computers and other costs there, there's huge savings. But it's not even just for that. It's also reducing a lot of friction as you look to support these folks. And one obvious example that we're huge believers in is kind of doing things like investigating virtual desktop options. Was part of one of the first large-scale shipments of work-at-home equipment back in 2007 for a financial services partner, American Express, and shipped huge towers for computers out to people. And I can tell you that it's hugely painful and horrible. Anybody that's had to go through that and manage physical equipment being sent out to hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of locations, and keeping track of that, getting it back, and all of those types of things is really painful. And there's so many great companies out there with the technology, whether it's ThinScale or Itopia, which are great technology companies that have virtual desktop options for us, or even managed services companies that do all of that work for you, and a company like Dision. Those are really straightforward solutions that can kind of take away the need to equip or ship anything. And I would just encourage all of us to continue to look at anything physical that we're doing, whether it's paper or agents raising their hands, or any of those types of things. How can we improve upon, automate, and take away the need for some of those kind of physical components to the work that we're doing. I've covered a whole lot and talked really a lot in a very short period of time, and again, just scrape the surface on some things that we'll continue to talk about in more detail. I would say, and would be remiss in not giving the quick sales pitch before I do the very last slide, which is really important. There are options, and Omni is certainly the one, and in my humble opinion, the one of the best ones for sure. There are companies out there that you can partner with and outsource with, and our approach is to do this very much in a kind of true partnership way, where we'll educate and work with you all to learn how to do this better internally, as well as doing it third party and outsourced wise. So just want to encourage you to kind of consider that as a part or as an entirety of your operation as well. But in closing, just wanted to kind of say, all right, where do we go from here? And again, we're not solving anything in 30 minutes, but raising questions and hopefully generating ideas. But really the recommendation, jumping all the way back to the first point of sort of that at-home first strategy, is establishing, as we call internally, somewhat of a tiger team, cross-functional group potentially that can get together and really think, kind of without constraints about how do we make this better? We're doing it, we're going to be doing it in the future. How do we make this work really as well as humanly possible for our company and our specific needs? And then start to understand your current team and look at them and say, okay, I maybe have some great people who are just a perfect match for this model. Maybe have some people that aren't quite a perfect match, maybe in the current roles that they're doing. But how can I kind of adjust and tweak and kind of take advantage of the skill sets that the current team has, as well as addressing maybe skill sets that they don't have, to really deliver upon this kind of remote promise that I'm going to be giving to my leaders and my company and my customers going forward. And then, quite simply, just what are those huge opportunities and challenges? How do we continue to engage our people and give them social outlets while they remain in a virtual environment? Those types of things. Consider all of the great parts, the hey, I love to work from home, as well as the hey, I miss interacting in an office and having those moments. What can we do as leaders to be able to harness and address those things? And then it's as simple as with a half smile, creating a formal plan and then reviewing it, implementing it, assessing it, and adapting it. It's not going to be perfect the first time around, but you can't hold off and wait for perfect to occur. And then, ultimately what we've found that most of our clients and partners do is they identify new and better ways to do things because of their virtual and at-home environment. And suddenly they recognize and say, hey, we can apply a bunch of these best practices to our physical bricks and mortar sites and centers. And that process and procedure that we do today, it's much better in the way that we're doing it for work at home. So again, continuous cycle and circle of improvement that doesn't exclude necessarily your physical environment. I'm up against time. I talked a little bit more than I was hoping to, but again, really appreciate everybody's time. I'll turn it back over to Julie to close up.
Thanks, David. Super helpful. I would say that if anyone wants to stay on for a minute, we do have a little bit of a window for questions. And I know that I had a question, actually. So I love the plan at the end. I love, of course, ending any presentation with action items, right? What can we go do right now to make this better? What would you say, like if someone was like, I'm not even sure, like I see your plan, I can go get a Tiger team, but I feel like people already have these environments set up, so it's a lot like working on a plane that's already in the air. Is there an area that you would say to focus in on first? Like, how do you even start to prioritize these lists or these challenges? How do you figure out what you're going to get the most impact from? What are you seeing with clients?
Yeah, it's I was hoping for a softball question, but that's a very good question. No, it's here is my default in all of these things is that you first look at kind of customer need, but then more directly to your question, the first answer is it's always the people. And so anything and everything that you can start to do, and it's sort of why we kind of structured it in the order that we did, anything and everything that you can start to do about looking at how can I do a better job of getting kind of better people, kind of better, kind of human capital in the beginning, and then you kind of build and improve upon them and give them better, environments, better technology, better support, all of those types of things. That would be, honestly, the very, very first place that I would start is focusing on kind of those people. And that's not just the agents, that's the supervisory staff, especially as well, and then other functions. But those two groups, just have such a meaningful impact, either positively or negatively, that would be the first place to start for me.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it's an amazing thing it really is an opportunity to look at how you're structuring this and open it up to, really being creative, with your people, with your systems, with everything from beginning to end, right? It's a chance to redo your training. It's a chance to, maybe shuffle around some of your workforce management. So I'm hoping that people really see this as a great opportunity because, like you said in the beginning, there is no necessarily going back to before. It will be some version of new normal, and like you said, 40% are not going back to the office. So thank you. So if anyone has any more questions, you of course can type them in, and we will answer them. The other thing is David, of course, is available at this email address, so you can email him directly with your questions. We'd love to hear your feedback from this. You will all be getting from us a link to this replay as well as a PDF to this presentation. And of course, any of your colleagues who weren't able to attend but registered, we will be sending the links out too. And as always, please share with your colleagues and others who might benefit from this information. And we look forward to seeing you at another webinar in the future. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.